Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. My name's Dr. Downey, and today we are going to be looking at a Dianabol cycle. But not just any Dianabol cycle, a Dianabol cycle consisting of 100 milligrams daily for 6 weeks. And you might ask if this was one of my clients, and no, it wasn't. It was actually done on study participants back in 1975. I'll show an image of the study now, but I found the study quite interesting, not only because of the dosage they use for Dianabol, but also the results were quite interesting. So in the study, 11 athletic participants were given 100 milligrams of Dianabol for 6 weeks. Half were given placebo, half were given the actual Dianabol, then there was a washout period, and then those who had received placebo got Dianabol, and those who had received Dianabol prior got placebo. You might wonder why they used 100 milligrams of Dianabol a day. Essentially, this was back in the time where they didn't believe anabolic steroids did much for performance enhancement. And so these researchers wanted to prove everyone wrong. So just to get this out of the way, I do not recommend ever using 100 milligrams of Dianabol a day, nor do I recommend the use of steroids, but you'll see now why 100 milligrams of Dianabol a day is actually quite pointless. So let's look at the results. Total body weight change with the introduction of Dianabol, 100 milligrams a week for 6 weeks was about 3 kilograms. Now, if you were to convert that into pounds, I think it would give you around 7 to 8 pounds of body weight change. And when trying to calculate how much of this was actually lean tissue, the majority of it was actually found to be lean tissue. However, they used skin fold tests. In the study, they didn't really look at side effects, or it just got briefly mentioned at the end of the results section that no one experienced an increase in blood pressure, or there were no discontinuations of the drug due to side effects, but at 100 milligrams a week, there's bound to be an increase in blood pressure. Now, let's look at the hormone changes. Unfortunately, they didn't look at much else, but if we look at these results, we can obviously see there was suppression of plasma testosterone, which did reach significance. Interestingly though, or not really, you'll see that FSH and LH didn't change, and this doesn't surprise me because a lot of individuals who use Dianabol cycles don't tend to get crazy suppression. And I would attribute this to the fact that its half-life is so short and much shorter than most oral steroids. And if you look at my previous video, the shorter the half-life, the less suppressive it is. But what was interesting to note is the change in cortisol levels. There was a significant elevation of plasma cortisol, as well as in urinary cortisol. The reason I find this quite interesting is because TRT actually decreases cortisol. But this effect of Dianabol on cortisol isn't only observed in this study. I've seen it being reported in other studies on Dianabol. And the researchers of this paper made a subjective observation that a lot of these individuals using Dianabol have a Cushingoid appearance, and I'll show you images of this above, but I actually think this is a fairly accurate observation. As with my own experience through individuals using Dianabol, stretch marks in odd places seem to be a very common thing, as well as the infamous moon face that you do get with Cushing Syndrome. And what is Cushing Syndrome? It's essentially an increase in circulating cortisol levels. The increase in cortisol might also explain many of the deleterious side effects that Dianabol does have, such as those increases in blood pressure, as well as accumulation of fat, although it wasn't showed in this study. But I wanted to compare this study to a similar study that was conducted during the same period. And in this study, they used much lower doses, not 100 milligrams a day, but it had a similar study design. And in this study, they looked at 10 milligrams a day of Dianabol or 25 milligrams a day. And with the other study, some received placebo, some received the Dianabol, and then there was a washout period, and then those receiving placebo got Dianabol, and those receiving Dianabol prior got placebo. And if we look at the results from this study, we can see that the change in body weight is more or less the same as that in the 100 milligram a day group. The duration of the study was also 6 weeks, and surprisingly, in these 13 subjects that they observed, more side effects were reported. And remember, in the other study, no side effects were reported. Acne was the biggest complaint, followed by headache, reduced sexuality, hypertension, raised liver enzymes. The change in systolic hypertension reached statistical significance with a 5% increase, whilst diastolic blood pressure didn't change that much. There was an elevation in cortisol that was sustained even during the placebo period, and the change in liver enzymes also was a sustained effect during the placebo period. The most drastic performance increase was noted in the study. In the study, they looked at performance improvement. And if you look at these graphs, you can see that during the steroid administration period, there was a massive increase in performance, and it was sustained during the placebo period. Researchers noted that the only thing that Dianabol seemed to grant these individuals was an improvement in strength, and the other benefits such as weight increase fell back to baseline after Dianabol was withdrawn. This was quite interesting because in the 100 milligram a day study, whilst there was that increase in body weight almost similar in magnitude to that of the study looking at Dianabol at 10 to 25 milligrams a day, there actually wasn't a statistically significant increase in athletic performance. You might say that the participants were different, but the reason I decided to compare these two studies is because the participants were very similar, not only in age, but in training background. Another interesting observation from the study looking at 10 milligrams and 25 milligrams is that the performance increase or improvement was not dose dependent, and neither was the weight gain. What we could conclude from this is that perhaps Dianabol at 10 milligrams a day is as effective as 25 milligrams of Dianabol a day, and possibly as strong as 100 milligrams a day. Now, that doesn't make sense logically. However, from this limited data that we do have, it would support this. But logic would obviously make us think that this is not true. And it might not be true because whilst the studies are very similar, methods in data collection may have differed. If we look at old reports by Dr. Michael Kerr, I think his name was, using a dose of 10 to 20 milligrams a day of Dianabol in his athletes that he wrote about, seemed to grant these athletes or bodybuilders significant performance advantages. And one of the main reasons I thought this video topic would be interesting is not only does it promote harm reduction by not supporting the notion that 100 milligrams a day is much stronger than 10 or 25 milligrams a day. So what are the takeaways from these two studies? Well, it would appear that Dianabol at 100 milligrams a day, according to the previous study, is fairly safe. However, what we also can conclude is that both 10 milligrams and 25 milligrams of Dianabol a day for 6 weeks is almost as strong as that of 100 milligrams. And one would also assume that taking lower dosages leads to fewer side effects. Another interesting takeaway from these two experiments is that Dianabol drastically increases cortisol, and this might lead to the typical Dianabol appearance And this might be the reason there is this typical Dianabol appearance that a lot of us can identify. But I'd like to know your guys' opinion about these old studies. There are many more using ridiculous doses such as 200 and 300 milligrams of Dianabol, and I'd like to know if you'd like to see more of these studies. So let me know what you think in the comments down below, and I will see you guys in the next video.